The long-suffering forces of the Astra Militarum have really had the short end of the stick throughout 9th edition, but it seems that we might finally be getting some rules leaks from their upcoming codex. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Guard, and just reacting to a few rumours of their coming codex, which I think, as just about every single Guard player will tell you, is long overdue. Imperial Guard just seem to have wound up with a fantastically raw deal throughout 9th edition. Their codex when it first dropped in early 8th was one of the most powerful for a little bit, but has been gradually codex creeped into oblivion over the years, and just with the way that the release cycle has panned out, they've wound up with one of the first codexes in 8th edition, and then no new book till one of the very last in 9th. Our poor embattled infantrymen are certainly in need of some reinforcements. So it appears that it really can't be too far away until the Guard get their book, with Tyranids out this week, both flavours of Knights coming after that, and then it's really quite likely to be Chaos Marines following this, due to Games Workshop actually teasing the 2 wounds thing. That will leave just Demons and Guard as the only 2 codexes that haven't received their proper 9th edition update yet. I have a feeling that they'll probably release the 9th edition books before releasing new codexes, like those new upcoming squats or leagues of Votan. If not though, I think it will be kind of tragically hilarious if it turns out that we wait so long for a Guard codex that even the squats get a release before we do. I'm certainly looking forward to getting some Guardsmen back on the field. Model-wise, there seems to be a fair bit of convergence on the different rumours, and it does look like the Guard are actually set for a fairly decent size release, making me think that it's likely to be paced out at least a fair bit behind Chaos Marines. The current rumours so far is that we're getting Creed, KD and Kazakin, heavy weapons teams, Sentinels, a heavy tank called the Rogal Dorn battle tank, and also either some Rough Riders or Death Riders that I forgot to put on this list. All of these seem to have been mentioned by multiple different rumours now. It finally seems that Games Workshop's given the Guard a really quite a decent release. It's been a very long time coming. Finally though, it seems like Guard are actually getting some rumours from playtesters, and the ones that I was going to talk about today come from a YouTube channel called Simply Warhammer. I'll link their video down in the description below. It's fairly short, punchy and well made. It's well worth a watch in my opinion. That's where you can find the rumours directly from the source. In any case, apparently this comes from him having a conversation with someone who's read the codex, presumably a playtester. I guess we don't know for definite whether or not it will be the finalised version of the codex or something that's a draft. So obviously there's very little confirmation on this. I'd certainly treat them as rumours, but things do seem kind of plausible. Maybe just something that's fun to talk about, and something to whet the Guard players' appetites while we continue to wait for the 9th edition book. First up is a bit of a rumour about the new unit, the Rogal Dorn battle tank, which has already been mentioned by several different sources as a new heavy tank somewhere between a Leman Russ and a Baneblade. Sounds like maybe it could be a bit of a competitor for the Forge World Macarius tanks, who perhaps kind of fit in this role at the moment, though Games Workshop hasn't really done a very good job of their rules. Like the Baneblade, they pale in comparison to Russ's. I think the name's an interesting one. Clearly it's aping the Leman Russ battle tank, naming another tank after a Primarch. Seems like it'd fit in okay, though I guess it could have been fun to name it after another Guard hero, rather than after a fancy Space Marine. In terms of the rules, the chap said that it'd be less than 18 wounds, so likely 15 to 16, as 17 would be a very weird number indeed, and that likely being good news for a couple of different reasons, meaning that it'd be able to hide behind line of sight blocking terrain, and also means it's very unlikely to be a Lord of War choice, which is generally going to be a disadvantage to just about any unit. At that kind of profile though, it's hard to see how it couldn't be in direct competition with the Leman Russ tanks. I really hope that they manage to keep both of them somewhat separate, and don't say just make the new model clearly better than the Rosses. The other thing that was mentioned for the tank was that apparently it's going to be Toughness 9, which definitely doesn't seem impossible, but it does seem a bit of a weird move throughout the rest of 9th edition 40k at the moment. It's not completely unheard of. Chaos Knights can get up to Toughness 9 with their Infernal Devotion. I think Walking Hive Tyrants have a way of getting Toughness 9 now, and the Mighty Space Marine Macedon from Forge World also has that as well. It would just seem a bit of a strange move though when things like Knights, Land Raiders, Wraith Knights and things all remain at Toughness 8. It just kind of feels that there might not be all that much lore justification for it, other than Games Workshop just trying to give the Guard something fun and special. In general, I think the idea that they've usually done so far is to give things Toughness 8 and then just increase the wounds or save characteristic if you want to have something abnormally tough. I think for me I kind of wouldn't mind if they just kept things at Toughness 8 and just gave Guard vehicles more wounds and things to show how massive they are. But I guess it could be something fun and unique that's a different challenge when fighting Guard. In particular, it should really help out against the plethora of Strength 8 anti-tank weapons, Eldar Lances and Melter Guns and things. They're all going to be a lot less efficient against a tank of that profile. Next up, there were a trio of small rumours for the Leman Russes. First up, that tank commanders were going to be going to ballistic skill 4+, but Russes in general would get a +1 ballistic skill to their turret weapons. Currently, tank commanders have ballistic skill 3+, and they're arguably the most efficient damage dealer in the entire Guard Codex, particularly from an anti-tank perspective with demolisher cannons and that hail of fire stratagem. I kind of feel that they're maybe not in the ideal place with that. I think Games Workshop might want them more leading other tanks, as opposed to just being the best gun turrets that you can get, so I could maybe see them reducing their ballistic skill to be more in line with the rest of the Guard. Hopefully they'll have a bit of a revise of their tank orders system. I'd quite like them to get changed in a way that it doesn't just make sense to sit around ordering yourself to do things, and they can actually order other Russes and function like the squadron commander that you might expect. Ballistic skill 4+ will be a bit more vulnerable to modifiers and things, like dense cover, but I'd certainly not be getting too stressed about it at the moment. For all we know, the points in their abilities could change drastically. It's absolutely possible that they could both reduce the ballistic skill to 4+ for tank commanders, and they also wind up making them spectacularly better and the most broken thing in the codex if their other numbers work out right. The turret weapon change of +1 ballistic skill will be very nice for the standard Russes. Again, that would be more resilient to modifiers. Still hitting on a 4+ with dense cover will be very nice indeed, and really keep the focus on the main gun over the sponsons. My guess is that they'll have a new profile that just consolidates the gun's fire instead of the grinding advanced rule. We've had a few similar units lose that double shoot mechanic in the last few codexes, things like Eldar Fire Prisms or Tyranid Exocrines. Finally, and perhaps the most intriguing change out of any of these, is that turret weapons are supposedly going to be able to fire out of close combat. So say if you've got a Leman Russ battle tank sitting around, and the enemy does manage to assail it with a few chaff units, I guess in theory any hull-mounted or sponson weapons could target the units that it's engaged with. It will be at -1 to hit though, I suspect, and the main battle cannon could not be too phased by the things that are trying to bog it down, and hopefully still aim and fire at something else. I think that would actually be really quite a useful buff in making Guard tank armies a bit more viable. It's always really disappointing when you have the blast tank Russes and the enemy manages to get just one chaff infantry unit in combat with them. It often means that your tank's firepower is just completely wasted in the next turn just because they managed to tap you with something that doesn't really threaten you. I still think there might be tricky choices involved though. If the enemy touches you with something threatening in combat, you're still going to have a very good incentive to fall back, as otherwise the rest of your army isn't going to be able to shoot at those models in combat, and maybe they might even kill your tank in your own turn, which will be very bad indeed. Still though, it seems like it would be a nice quality of life upgrade if you were facing a lot of chaff, and might make Guard players a little bit less reliant on screening if they want to field loads of tanks. Finally, there's a trio of other things. First of all, they're saying that Deathcore of Krieg are indeed in the Codex. I think that was kind of a given really, to be honest, seeing as Games Workshop came out with a plastic kit for them. Previously they were Forge World exclusives, so a bit of an afterthought for the main Codex. Now they're a Games Workshop regiment, so now they might actually get their own unique order, stratagem, relic, and a few other bits. My guess would be that they'll just give them the regiment rules and probably not reprint things in the Forge World compendium. I still guess that things like their engineer squads will probably remain a Forge World choice, at least until Games Workshop makes a plastic version of them if they do. As it's now by far their best regiment kit that they make, I think it will be unusual for them to leave them out. I do also wonder whether the Tanith might be represented in some way. I'm sure that Gaunt's Ghosts will be in the Codex, seeing as they have models. It will be interesting if Games Workshop branches out to support them as well, or whether or not you still have to represent them with a custom regiment. Next up, they said that Death Strike missiles will be getting a lot better. Not really surprising really, as they couldn't really get much worse with their terrible firing mechanics. Currently they're the missile that might not fire until the very last turns of the game, and perhaps launched at a time where they're not going to make any significant difference. They stated that the damage would be a fairly hefty amount of damage to their primary target, and then a massive 3d3 mortal wounds within 6 inches. I feel like that sort of destructive power will be a bit more fitting with the big missile that it has right now, and it will be a massive disincentive to the enemy clumping up and putting too many units close together. The other bit that they were talking about that I didn't really understand was saying that it in some way will be able to fire 3 missiles. They were speculating whether or not they might be redoing the Death Strike or Manticore kit, which I really can't see them doing. It's really quite a recent one, and there's so many older kits in the Guard Codex that they haven't redone yet. Not really too sure what they're getting at here, unless it's maybe a projectile that splits into 3 missiles and you get 3 attacks on your target. Or perhaps there's some sort of mechanic for reloading. You get to fire it on the first turn, then maybe you have to do an action to reload it the next turn, and perhaps you might be able to get to fire more than one devastating cruise missile off in-game. Not really too sure what to make of that one though. Probably best to wait until we actually get the full rules. Finally, they rounded up by stating that Rough Riders are also in the book. Again, not exactly the biggest surprise given that rumour engine that clearly showed a Rough Rider's hunting lance, but absolutely great to have some additional confirmation of that. I think the absolute dream for me for that kit would be to have a Rough Rider kit that also has the parts to make some Deathcore Death Riders. Maybe that's pushing out the boat a little bit too far. I'd absolutely settle for some awesome classical cavalry charges in 40k that are available to any regiment. So overall, a whole bunch of interesting hints and teasers there. It really will be interesting to see how much of this turns out to be accurate when the book does eventually drop. The tank changes certainly sound interesting. It would be really quite cool if you could field literally an entire armoured company of nothing but armoured behemoths, and it's actually something that can function okay in game. It'll be interesting to see what sort of buffed rules the standard lasgunners get as well. And as I said, I'd certainly recommend going and checking out that short video from Simply Warhammer, as after all that is where all this information came from. In any case, if you'd like to see more 40k things, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or certainly keep up with the regular news and rumours for 40k releases. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Certainly looking forward to learning more about the Guard Codex, and I'll most definitely be reviewing it in full once it's out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find linked down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few additional benefits, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.